All right, let's do this. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. It's time for another exciting lightning talk. I'm Parag Katkar, your host for tonight. I'm the head of consulting practices at InRhythm. InRhythm is a modern product and technology consulting firm, and our practice leads stay on top of the latest technology trends in the industry. And every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, one of our consultants shares their knowledge of the exciting trends with you. And this week, our iOS expert, one of our senior engineers here at InRhythm, Othmar Gispert, is going to give us an overview of the best practices to implement smooth and accessible localization and automatic grammar agreement architecture. So without further ado, let's get it started, Othmar.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you everybody for being here. So yeah, I'm going to talk about localization and automatic grammar agreement. So what is this? Well, as an introduction, with the introduction of Xcode 13 and Swift 5.5, Apple presented some new improvements in Foundation. And one of those improvements was the introduction of something called automatic grammar agreement. There are some new things in the latest WWDC. They presented some new features, and well, we're gonna talk about those too. So what it is? Automatic grammar agreements basically adapts the text according to the language, following some specific rules. You know that each language has its own grammatical rules. So this fixes the localized strings to match the gender, the number, the order, and even the user preferences. And this does it using something called inflection rule. So we're going to talk about the inflection rule now. So probably you're used to this kind of code where you have a counter and then you have a string, right? So you will put something like this. If the count is 1, then you have this kind of string. And if the count is something else than 1, then probably you will need to modify it, adding an S in this case, or doing something else. So you can do this, or you can probably do a ternary operation here instead. But anyway, the result is the same. So now let's see the inflection rule. So here, as you can see, it's only one line, and it does basically the same thing, but now you have to add using Markdown and attributed strings. You can add this inflect true, and then the result is going to be the same, but now you only have one line. But what if you want to modify also the noun and the adjective, right? So probably you can create a couple of enums like this, where you will specify different colors or different fruits. And then in your code, you will have to do something like this, right? Now, here again, you will need to add the S for the fruits, or else you will have to create the enum, a bigger enum with the fruits in plural, something like that. And then you will need to probably add more cases here. Well, with the inflection rule, this is all you have to do. You just pass the variables, and that's it. You don't need to do anything else. Now let's see how this is working. First is going to be the old method, and then the new method. All right, that works, and that works the same in both cases. Okay, But what if you want to add another language, right? You want to support different regions or different countries. Well, then you will have to add a localized string for she wants. And obviously you will have to add localized strings for the color and the fruits and everything else. And in the else case, oh, well, you will have to do the same. Now with the inflection rule, you don't have to do anything else. I mean, as you can see, this is exactly the same line as it was before. Now, let's see the old implementation. Okay, the translation is good, but here is what I was talking about, the order. In different languages, the order is different. So in English, we have the noun and at the end, and the adjective comes before. But in Spanish, the noun should be before the adjective, right? So let's see what's going on with the new implementation. There you go. The other difference is that in Spanish, you will have to pluralize the two words, not only apple, you will have to pluralize also the adjective. So as you can see here, the line is exactly the same, but what's happening under the hood? We have the localizable strings file, and there you will have the localizable string for the whole string. But the difference is that in Spanish, you can assign orders. So you will say that you want the noun to appear in the second position and the adjective to appear in the third position, right? So the inflection rule does everything else. You don't have to do anything else. Now, there is something else. What if you want to change also the subject, right? Now you don't want to do she, but he or they. Well, Apple now has something new that is term of address. If you don't have that, probably you will need to create another enum with some options. And again, you will have to include this in your if-else statement. Now it becomes a little bit bigger because now you will have to do some more customization depending on the gender or on the preference, right? And it will look something like this. I mean, you can probably reduce the code a little bit, but at the end, it's going to be something like this. Now, let's see it with the inflection rule. Now, Apple introduced this new type that is term of address. That is basically the same as the enum that we saw before. You have masculine, feminine, and you have a neutral types here. So what you need to do is add that to the options, to the localization options. You will need to add the term of address of the person object, let's say, and then you will pass those options in the attributed string. Now, the other new concept is this reference concept. One means that it will take the first reference in the array, so which is this one, right? And then the inflection rule for the rest of the elements that we saw before. For other languages than English, we have these new options in the language and region. So you can specify the terms of address, or you can just leave it unspecified. This will become available also for English from now on. And this is good because, for example, in English, you will say welcome, and it's the same for any gender. But in Spanish, you will say bienvenido for masculine or bienvenida for feminine. Right now in the Notes app, they have something generic in Spanish. Te damos la bienvenida a Notas. And in English is welcome to Notes. Now with the inflection rule and knowing the term of address, this can be more, let's say, personalized. Bienvenido a notas or bienvenida a notas, right? And then you can also specify an alternative. So if the user hasn't selected any term of address, then you roll back to the previous implementation. But yeah, now the last thing is what is new with Swift 5.9. So we have new languages supported. Now we have French, Italian, Portuguese, and German. I mean, plus Spanish that was already there. We have a dependency agreement. This is cool because now, what if you have to modify some other labels in your same view, but those are not in the same string, right? So now you can add another option that is the element that you want to agree with. So, for example, the word small in Spanish is pequeño or pequeña. So if the fruit is an apple, it will be la manzana pequeña. But if the fruit is a mango, it will be el mango pequeño. So now you can change those words according to the gender of the main element in this case. Another thing is the agree with argument. This is to inflect a different word that is probably in the same string, but according to the same, I mean, to the main object. So in this case, as I was saying, la manzana, and this word will change according to the first argument, which is this one. And the new type term of address that we already mentioned, and the referent concept. This is, again, to change another word inside the same string, and that word will be changing according to the first argument. In this case is the person name. So if you know the person name and if you know the term of address, you can change the rest of the words to match the subject in this case. And that's it. These are some useful links. You can watch the WWDC 20 from 21 or the WWDC from this year to know a little bit more about it or to get a deep insights from those videos and about the inflection rule. Thank you, and the floor is open for some questions.
There. Yeah, just wondering, like, so before these changes, so I did watch the WWDC video for this, and I was like pretty impressed with it. Just wondering, like, before these changes, like, what was the user experience like for people using apps in Spanish or other languages, for example? Because I mean, I'm coming at this from a perspective, like, I only speak English. I don't really know what user experience is like in other apps, but I remember being struck when I saw this video that, like, you know, before this, like, was grammar in a Spanish language app, was it just wrong? Like, what was it like before this?
Well, yeah, that depends on the app. Obviously, that depends on the developers there. If your app has localization, then it depends on the localizable strings that they were adding there to translate all the words in your app. But if your app didn't have localization, then you will see the same experience. You will see the English experience. So yeah, that depends on the developers or on the app.
But like, if a developer really wanted to, like, put in the effort to have, you know, gender agreement and you know, have a multi-language app, and the developer wanted to, you know, they were willing to put in the time to do that, was it just a ton of if-else statements and a lot of additional work to try and actually
Right.
make it, grammatically correct.
Yes, absolutely. Because as I mentioned, some of the words are not in the same place, so you will
Right.
need to also adapt that in your localizable strings. So you can either have a bunch of if-else statements, or you can have a bunch of localizable strings just to, probably to translate the whole phrase in one single localizable string, right? But yeah, that depends on the approach that the developer wanted to follow.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Cool. Any other questions?
I have a question here, just out of curiosity. I think you presented two examples, and I may be confusing myself somewhat here, but where would the addressable strings be defined? Would these be inside the localizable strings, or are they in some kind of modifier function?
No, it will be in the localizable strings. You can generate those. Exporting the strings from your app, and it will generate the file automatically. The only thing that you will need to do is probably modify a couple of things. For example, in the Spanish version, you will need to add the numbers to change the order of the words, right? To specify the position of the word. That's something that you have to add manually, at least from my experience, because as you know, some of these features, as they were released, but you know that sometimes those are not fully functional, at least not as they should. So that probably I should have mentioned that as a disclaimer. But yes, you will generate those, and then you will import the localizable strings into your project, and that's it. Probably you will need to modify a couple manually.
Gotcha. And then more out of curiosity as well, if you have translators working on your localization, would they be familiar with the syntax or the additions that need to be handled here for addressable formats?
Well, they should. Right?
Right. I'm just wondering if this is like newer. Maybe there is some, I don't know if they are already aware or if things would need to be communicated accordingly, just so when engineers, or if it is, I guess there's going to be a distribution method whenever the translators would be done with the localization. If they're not updated, I guess there may need to be some extra effort or communications with the translators.
Yeah, are you talking about the feature or the language itself?
The language. Well, I'm imagining if you are working with translators, how would you get the strings back? Any kind of local, would they give you back localizable files for each language set, or how would that work?
I don't think so. I think they will give you the copy, and then you will need to create the localizable strings for those, depending on the UI. But usually, on my experience, they only give you the copy, and then you will have to do the rest of the work.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's still might be some developer iteration over the strings that are coded.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Well, if not, then let's wrap it up. Thanks a lot, Othmar. Such an informative talk. Really appreciate you doing that. And as a reminder to you all, we do the lightning talks every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern time. And next week, one of our senior software engineers at InRhythm, Paul, is going to give us an overview of AWS Cloud Development Kit, which is also known as AWS CDK, which is a framework to define cloud infrastructure in code and provision it through AWS Cloud Formation. And I'm really looking forward to this talk. Make sure you mark your calendar for next week. Thank you all for joining and have a wonderful evening. I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.